Hey, welcome to the house where Ghost at Dusk is set. It was the house that I grew up in. This is the house that inspired that whole story. And what's interesting, and the reason I wanted to make this video, is that the state that this house is in right now is exactly the state that the house of Ghost at Dusk and Timothy Lane is set in right at the beginning of that book, meaning completely empty. My dad was living here up until this year. He's almost 90. We just moved him to assisted living. We've cleaned out the house, so now it's actually empty. So it's exactly like the way that novel started. So I'm going to give you a little tour. We're going to talk a little background about how the book started and came to be, and it should be kind of cool. So check it out. Original idea for Ghost at Dusk came to me one day. I was at lunch. I was eating these little power bar squares. I think they came from Whole Foods or something, and I was thinking, nobody would give these out for Halloween treats. I don't know why I thought that, I just thought that. And then I started thinking, well, back in the 70s when I was a kid, I remember getting handouts from neighbors of like apples or homemade cookies and stuff like that, and then, you know, one thing led to another, and I started thinking, well, why did that stop? And you know, there are stories of razor blades and apples, or poisons, or LSD from hippies, you know, that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden this idea popped into my head, like, what would happen if those things were true and there was a ghost left over? And what if that ghost got trapped in his house and could never leave the house he grew up in? And so this is the house I grew up in, and this is what I used for the inspiration of that story. So this is the hallway that the novel opens in, with Tim hovering around on an October afternoon, listening to the quiet of the house that's empty because he had to haunt his father out of the house. Because he wasn't alone in the house. He can't leave the house. But there's somebody in the neighborhood who can come in the house and leave the house, who's been tormenting Tim ever since that fatal Halloween where he died after eating the poison cookies. This is my bedroom where I grew up, and this is the bedroom that was Tim's bedroom. And this is roughly where he died. He started feeling the symptoms of the poisoning and then lunged this way out the door and into the hallway, which is a scene and a motif that repeats later in the novel as he's trying to get his father to leave the house. So imagine you're in a house that's empty. You can't leave. You've explored every nook and cranny as a ghost, out of boredom and trying to cling to some sanity. Day in and day out, season after season, trapped in the same house, seemingly forever. So one of the things that made this novel so different from my previous horror novels or the previous fantasy novels I'd written is that I very explicitly mined my own childhood and adolescence for the emotional heart of that novel, and that all took place right here. This is the dining room where I played D&D with my friends. This is the dining room that Tim Lane remembers playing D&D with his friends. And I think making that real connection in this novel gave it something for me that felt really special. And I think the way a lot of people have responded to it, I think that carried through a little bit. And that in and of itself gave me a huge boost forward in how I think about my own writings and what I'm trying to do with my novels. So again, Ghost at Dusk, because of this setting and the way it works in my own life, has informed everything I've written since. So one of the observations that Tim has is that, like, just the sound of like the furnace going on and off, keeping the house warm, is one of the things that reminds him of when people were there. And that sense of loneliness and that sense of loss and that sense of, in a way, childhood disappearing. Although in his case, it was he as a child or as a teenager got left behind, and the rest of the world and the rest of life moved on from him. I thought that was a really interesting and kind of heartbreaking thing to explore as part of the novel. And the other part of the novel too is it's creepy, and like this basement right now that I'm standing in is empty and it's dark and it is kind of creepy. So if something happens to me, you know, send help. So this is it. This is where it happened. This is where the inspiration took place. I wrote the book, the first third of it, in sort of one go, one chunk, and then I put it aside for a while because I was working on the books of Conjury. About a year later, I took the novel back out of the drawer, or the first third of that novel out of the drawer, and I took a look at it, and I realized it was actually pretty solid, and then I just dove into it and wrapped it up. You can check out the audiobook here on the channel. You can pick up an ebook copy right at my website if you want to, or any of the other realtors. Also, Ghost at Dawn is the prequel to Ghost at Dusk. That takes place a few houses down the street, but that's for another video. All right, thanks for watching. Hope you're well. Take care. Bye. He finds himself. Oh, geez, look at that. A hobbit hole.